r/AskReddit by Reddify. What was one of the largest mistakes in history? Blockbuster once had the opportunity to buy out Netflix for only $9 million. They declined the offer, only to ironically go bankrupt because of Netflix, which is now worth billions. Could you imagine the disaster that Netflix would be today if Blockbuster took it over? Netflix also pushed digital streaming. It's a good chance we would all be stuck with cable, with a few hitty streaming services and no innovative programming. Why do you think this is a more likely outcome than a similar service emerging just with a different name? Making Germany take sole responsibility for WWI. It led to a worldwide depression and the rise of Hitler. I definitely agree that the Treaty of Versailles has to be up there for one of the greatest mistakes in the 20th century. Germany loses the war, makes them pay. Germany then made everyone else pay. Bad mistakes are bad. Prohibition in the US, 1920s on booze. No one was really happy about it. It led to the rise of the organized crime, which led to their control of other illegal activities. Edit, corrected typo. Edit 2, added comment on booze. And that's why you don't make constitutional amendments to deal with overly specific hit. Yahoo rejecting the acquisitions of both Facebook and Google. I think we should all be thankful of that. Yahoo would waste them if they did. You're right. Facebook is insufferable garbage without Yahoo's help. Excite refused to buy Google search engine for $750. 000. I've heard a story and I want it to be true. When Google was first starting up, they at one point had a massage therapist on staff and the job didn't pay much, but they paid her in stock. She doesn't work as a massage therapist anymore. Facebook made a similar deal with the guy who painted their first office. NASA accidentally taping over the moon landing. In fact, there are no known original recordings of the event. Let's say that again. They taped over the moon landing. When you stumble upon a free porn weekend, you grab the first tape you can get your hands on. I can't fault them for that one. The ops username might explain why this never occurred to him. The movie camera was invented by the Lumiere brothers, who originally made the camera to be sold to the elites who could afford the technology as a toy. To advertise their invention, they exhibited films such as workers leaving the factory in local theaters. Yet after they quickly realized the potential profit of showing films alone, they decided to stop selling their invention and solely focus on making more films to show in theaters, so that they would have complete control over the film industry. However, inventors around the world quickly developed their own film technology based off the brothers' invention, and made their fortunes off selling their cameras to one-ape filmmakers. Eventually the Lumiere brothers lost their influence in the film industry. Yet they would have had an incredible fortune if they didn't decide to keep their own invention to themselves. If anything, their films only made the demand for film technology greater, which other inventors and patent owners such as Thomas Edison took advantage of. Edit, nearly 3 years of film school and this comment is my best thing I've accomplished so far with what I've learned. What the hell am I doing with my life? I read a great article about how California became the motion picture center because of loose patent laws and they stole all the film and camera technology. There was also the fact that the US government was very strict about what could and couldn't be shown on film. Imagine the stink that was made about violent video games back in the 1990s. Yeah, it was like that. Part of the solution was to move the film industry to the other side of the country from Washington and let Uncle Sam deal with it after the films were made. World War I, which was one of the worst wars in history, led to arguably the worst war in history, and was started because countries couldn't talk to each other in a rational way. WWI is just a series of stupid. First, you have let's run straight at the enemy and everyone died. Then, you have let's run straight at the enemy behind a very slow curtain of artillery barrage, and everyone still died. Finally someone says, let's not just run straight at the enemy, and some people actually survive, although a lot still died. In his podcast on the series, Dan Carlin makes the not unreasonable point that it's only stupid in hindsight. At the time there were simply no tactics capable of winning such a modern, industrialized war, as no one had ever fought one. No one could even fully conceive of the slaughter they were about to encounter. The tactics employed were the best they could come up with, because with the technology available to both sides and the disposition of forces, plus the sheer scale of men involved, there just wasn't a way to avoid mass casualties. Not handing the ball to beast mode. Also not running 3 straight times, and kicking a 35-yard field goal to effectively end the game. After being up 28-3, the Falcons ran a total of 5 rushing plays the remainder of the game. That was some of the worst coaching and play calling I have ever seen. A lot of Napoleon and Hitler references. What about invading Iraq when there were no WMD? And destabilizing the country and region, resulting in thousands of civilian deaths, and directly giving rise to ISIS/ISIL. Bouncing off that, I would say we can trace the problems of the region back to when the Ottoman Empire was carved up for the victors following WWI. 100% this is correct. Had the British upheld the promises of tolerance of Arabia and allowed the Arab self-rule after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, instead of going ahead with the imperialist, disastrous Sykes-Picot Agreement, then the latter half of the 20th century would have been a lot less chaotic, at least in Southwest Asia. Russia selling the US Alaska thinking it was a useless wasteland. They actually mainly sold it because they knew the Brits would take it over sooner or later. To them it was just, let's just earn some quick cash by selling this wasteland, rather than having those Brits steal that wasteland from us. Pretty much the same story as the Louisiana Purchase. The French couldn't hold it anyways, so they sold it, rather than just lose it. An elderly man throws away a Euro Millions lottery ticket. Loss in 2010, $181 million. Reminds me of that guy who now spends every weekend in a Scottish garbage dump looking for the computer he threw away because it has millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on it. Creating the universe. Widely regarded as a bad move. This has made a lot of people angry. There have been at least a few armies destroy themselves because they thought the other half of their own force were the enemy. I'm sure all of those are up there. Or when some groups Native Americans were first given guns for warfare against the British during the French and Indian War. They would use the same tactics as with bows. Surround the enemy and fire from the trees. One problem. Bullets go further than arrows and hit your buddies on the other side of the enemy if you miss. Didn't they use that reference in The Engine in the Cupboard? It's been 25 years since I read that book. Sears was set up to be Amazon. They had a huge catalog that was widely known for over 100 years. Sears Roebuck catalog started in 1888, plus they introduced the first credit card, Discover, in 1986. They had everything they possibly could have needed to start an online store, but instead opted for the brick and mortar. What followed is a long spiral of decline. They stopped the catalog, sold of Discover, and this year even sold their legendary tool line Craftsman to Stanley. Edit. Yes, people, Discover was not the first credit card. I have realized my error, and shall go and say no more. When they paired up with Kmart, all I could think of was, if you tie 2 sinking stones together they still won't float. Kmart bought Sears, and mostly for the land/building that Sears owned. The idea was to sell some locations, rebrand with a new capital, and kill off the Kmart name. But then the Great Recession hit and all of those stores and land lost value, and also increased Kmart expenses. It's been a slow, painful death for them. Kodak invented the digital camera, but declined to develop it. Since they had a lock on photography, everyone used Kodak cameras to take pictures on Kodak film, which was developed with Kodak chemicals and printed on Kodak paper. Now they are out of business, having jumped too late into the digital arena. Edit. Apparently Kodak are not out of business. Not one of the better Kodak moments in business. A Kodak moment refers to what Kodak's market experienced when Nokia put small but usable enough cameras into every mobile phone at no perceived extra cost. Destruction of the Library of Alexandria. Also on the list, that time I sold a copy of Library of Alexandria for like $350, right before its massive temporary price spike to $1.000. I once sold a Beta Black Lotus for $20. But in my defense, all of my friends said, "Holy hit. You got $20 for a single magic card?" Ah. The early days. The dudes who changed the itinerary of Archduke Ferdinand, but forgot to tell the drivers. We all know how that one turned out. Germany trying to maintain a two-front, not including other Axis powers, war, twice. From Germany's view, they didn't really have a choice. Their confrontation with the USSR was viewed as inevitable by both sides, and Britain's stubbornness was costing them money, men and morale. Had they continued to focus on the Western Front, they may have been too weak to stop the USSR from sweeping across Europe. It's easy to be wise in hindsight. But at the time of Barbarossa, the German army was assumed to be the strongest in the world, and quick success against the last remaining power in Europe would probably have been the only thing to bring the British to the negotiating table. They also, along with many others, thought the Soviet Union would quickly fold. We have to remember that Russia got its ass kicked in World War I and bowed out early, and then the Soviet Union struggled to fight Finland in the Winter War. Hitler could be excused for thinking that the Soviet Union was not the juggernaut it turned out to be. Letting Brits draw international borders. But Stanley, you've simply drawn a line around all of the countries in the world. Pickett's charge at the Battle of Gettysburg and the lesser-known frontal assault at the Battle of Franklin by John Bell Hood. Pickett's charge was the climatic assault at the Gettysburg when General Lee instructed General Longstreet to march exhausted Confederate soldiers across a 1/4 mile field under constant artillery fire to assault the center of the Union lines. By the time the Confederates reached the stone walls the Union troops were hiding behind, they lost something like 30% of their strength. The few groups that made it through the wall were massacred. The entire 1862 class of Volmis formed a company known as the University Greys. All but one were casualties. The attack discredited Lee among his staff, with Longstreet leaving for Georgia, and seriously damaged the Army of Northern Virginia. At Franklin, an even bigger frontal assault was planned by Confederate John Bell Hood. The Union artillery loaded triple canister, basically 3 times the normal load of 8mm steel balls, and fire into the attacking Confederates. Witnesses said that you would hear the cannons retort and then the shattering of thousands of Confederate bones as hundreds of men broke into pieces. One Confederate drummer boy, aged 12, tried to stop a Union cannon by shoving a fence post into it. He reached the cannon as it fired and disappeared in a pink mist. Word to the wise, frontal assault don't typically work. Triple canister. I've played enough Empire Total War to know how that ends. Hey look, it's a boat with some white people on it. I'll go see what they want. It's like that famous saying, curiosity killed over 3/4 of the native population of the Americas. Still waiting on the whole, and satisfaction brought them back part. Electing Donald Trump. Edit. I'd like to dedicate this insightful comment award to, first off, my mom. She raised me well and taught me the benefit of constant skepticism and the importance of reading. Also, Dane, you get me free here and always help me start fights at the comedy club over Trump. And lastly, all you Moron Trump voters. You give me all my material and endless laughs. Depressing laughs, but laughs at the same time. Yes. Electing Donald Trump is one of the largest mistakes in history. Right up there with letting 25 million people die, invading Russia in the winter, and pissing off Genghis Khan. Look, I get that people don't like him, but stop with the hyperbole. Don't you know? Trumpf is literally Hitler. Even though he's been president for only 3 weeks. That's the same as exterminate millions of Jews. Right? Has to be Dunkirk in WW2. Close to 400,000 Allied troops were literally surrounded by the Germans at the start of the war. Even though the Germans were outnumbered, they had better positioning and divisions at their disposal. For whatever reason, the German High Command decided, with Hitler's approval, to stop their progress of destroying the stranded forces. This allowed a mass evacuation to occur, which required the help of any vessel capable of carrying people. Had those men been killed or captured, the Germans could have considered a land-based invasion of England, forcing America's hand to join the war earlier than desired, and essentially no French resistance. Regardless, that is 400,000 less fewer soldiers to worry about. And in my eyes, Germany royally ducked up. Can't wait for the movie. Edit. Spelling courtesy of /u/cool hand Luke. Edit 2. Italicizing considered, as I'm not suggesting it would have been an easy task to invade England. But dealing with fewer soldiers would have made any potential invasion easier to deal with, however daft a decision. Came here to say this. One of Hitler's own generals wrote in his journal that Hitler's strange decision to make the Panzer divisions hold off from storming Dunkirk probably lost the war for the Nazis. It wasn't Dunkirk that lost the war. It was a myriad of things that lost the war. That war wasn't winnable for Germany. Edit, wasn't. Not was. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can watch together.